We're joined on the phone today by author Ryan Britt, talking about his new book, Luke Skywalker Can't Read, and Other Geeky Truths. How are you today, Ryan?
Hi, Dustin. Not bad. What's going on?
Well, I'm just excited to talk to you about this new book you got. Interesting title, of course, Luke Skywalker and Other Geeky Truths. Can you tell the listeners a bit about it?
Sure. It's a collection of essays about science fiction, fantasy, and geeky topics, kind of ranging from the ones that I think that a lot of people are interested in, like Star Wars, Sherlock Holmes, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings. And the title essay is about, literacy in Star Wars and whether or not there is any. But yeah, it's a kind of a collection of kind of my thoughts about those various topics.
So yeah, this sounds like something you've obviously spent a lot of time with and seem like an authority on this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I either wrote the book in a year or it took me 34 years, depending on how you look at it. I have been spending a lot of time with it for sure.
Well, I got to ask, I know you cover a lot of areas in the book, Star Wars you mentioned, and Back to the Future, Barbarella is even in there. Is there
That's right.
Is there an area that maybe you weren't able to add that you wanted to? Will we see maybe a part 2 down the road?
Sure, I mean, tons. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not an authority on Game of Thrones, and so I didn't jump into that one. It was frightening enough to do the Tolkien essay and really jump into that research. So that's something. I love a lot of these 80s cartoons I grew up with, like He-Man and Transformers, and a lot of the writers of those are really interesting. And so I'd like to do something with that. Ghostbusters, the films, of course, are fantastic, and I'm obsessed with ghosts in general. So writing more about that would be really fun. And there's aspects to some of the other stuff that I'd like to explore more.
Well, you and I are the same age, so I definitely can relate and understand the book. And I got to ask, I know obviously you and I are both a bit biased, but the 80s seems like probably the best time to grow up in.
I agree. I agree completely, because those films, even the stuff's right on the cusp, like 2001 and Alien, because they would have been then in our canon.
Sure.
That came out in the late 70s. Those movies, you think about Close Encounters and E.T. and Back to the Future, they look so good still. You know what I mean? It's not like they don't look bad. A contemporary 20-something or a teenager would be like, movie looks pretty awesome. The clothes might seem a little funny, but not even that anymore.
Well, again, we're on the phone today with author Ryan Britt and talking about his book, Luke Skywalker Can't Read. I got to ask, is it just Luke Skywalker? Is it just Jedis maybe that haven't been hitting the books, or what's your theory on that?
I think that in the book I talk about this a little bit in the essay, is that I think that Luke, as we meet him, is a little bit of a Philistine. But I imagine that the educated people like Princess Leia probably can read a little bit more, and the Jedi probably can read, but they're all systematically murdered. And so if you want to have a secretive government, getting rid of the most literate people is probably the best way to do it. So I think that what it is the idea that your average kind of middle class, lower class citizen of that sprawling galaxy doesn't need that kind of education, because they rely so heavily on their robots and their holograms and stuff like that. And then sure, there's a written language, and the more privileged people can read it. But Luke, as we meet him, is not necessarily literate.
So do you think maybe that was a bit of foreshadowing for, I guess, society nowadays? Everybody has Wikipedia and the internet. Nobody really has to know anything anymore.
Yeah, I guess that what I was trying to do towards the end of that piece is sort of draw those parallels, is to think about the idea that, we could be, doing the too long didn't read thing that you see online sometimes, where people are just assuming that they know the content without knowing it. And I was thinking, well, in Star Wars, that there is no media, there's no journalism, there's no content of any kind. And so that's sort of super fascinating to me. And, I was told recently that the Oxford Dictionary this year, I guess, I might be Oxford, it might be someone else, that the word of the year was an emoji. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm talking about in Luke Skywalker Can't Read, So yeah, I think it is a little bit prescient.
Yeah, I guess there definitely is a sad commentary to be had with that, I think.
Yeah, but also a hopeful one because Star Wars is ultimately. I don't think it's like a mistake that Star Wars is making. I think that it actually might be an accidental sort of cautionary tale. That and you can see it in the previews for the new film that they're saying that once again, like the Jedi have gone away into myth, and I'm like, no one is writing anything down. As part of the problem.
Yeah, let's talk about the new Star Wars film. You see the toys, you see the commercials and everything. Everybody's all in hysterics. I mean, is this going to be like new Star Wars film every year until the end of time?
It is going to be that, it sounds like. It does sound like that is exactly what is going to happen. Is that a good thing? Maybe. Personally, I'm a little bit scared of that much Star Wars. The beauty of Star Wars was always in its minimalism, right? We only just had the movies, and every once in a while, and then we never expected the prequels, and then we got them, and we kind of didn't want them. And so then I feel like that suddenly there's just going to be like this, now we're going to be getting everything we want all the time. The beauty of Star Wars is the absence makes the heart grow fonder aspect to it. So at the same time, it's very exciting, and if the movies are exciting and they're interesting, then then it'll be a windfall for people like you and I. But I think that there's definitely some nervousness about it.
Well, then I got to ask you, guys that grew up with this kind of love for pop culture and Star Wars, and you'd throw around the term geek, I guess, which didn't used to be an endearing term. And now it's kind of like a badge of honor for some of these, I don't know, maybe you call them geek come latelys or something.
Sure.
So do you think like people who were in this stuff from the beginning, they loved Barbarella and He-Man, and now all these people are kind of jumping on the bandwagon. Are the real geeks kind of feeling threatened by some of these trendier ones that are coming down the pike?
Well, if they are, then they should get over it. If they are feeling threatened, then I mean, what's the problem? I think that I am probably a little bit more militant than I even come across in the book. Is that I really just think that the reason why this stuff is popular is because it's good, and it's just now everyone has kind of grown up and caught up to the fact that some of this stuff is good and says more than it might appear to say. Science fiction and fantasy, people will talk about how it's extreme or whatever, but it's allegorical in ways that we're not even aware of yet. Maybe Barbarella just became something that we could understand. Maybe Star Wars is just now, maybe it was so ahead of its time that we're just now kind of catching up with some of the more profound things it might have been telegraphing out. So, if the younger generations are more hip to that, it's because that they've been indoctrinated with it longer. And so that's a good thing, probably.
Yeah, I guess it is a bit of a delicate balance. I know when I was a kid and you would listen to a band, and then when, 5 or 6 more people found out about them, then all of a sudden you couldn't like them anymore, that kind of mentality. So, but nowadays it just seems like with, maybe it is with the internet and our ease of access to things, that whole kind of thing is kind of out the window, I guess.
Yeah, and also, the thing about Star Wars is that, Star Wars has always been really popular. Star Trek is a little bit different, but Star Wars has always been for everyone. And I think that the fans that, kind of obsess about it and know too much about it and maybe write whole essays about it, we might feel a little protective sometimes. But again, I think that part of that is changing.
Yeah, definitely. Again, we're on the phone today with author Ryan Britt and talking about his book, Luke Skywalker Can't Read, and other geeky truths. I got to ask, kind of along the same lines with comic books, it seems like superhero remakes now are all the rage. I don't know that the people that love these movies actually read the comics, but maybe that's something that's going to come along eventually too.
Well, the numbers on that are really interesting, actually. In 2012, you would be right. When the Avengers came out, you would definitely be right that there wasn't a reflection necessarily, right, of readers, of like a spike in comic book readership. But now there is. Now, if you look at the numbers from 2012 till now, comic book readership has increased. And that's a direct, connection with the, not just the Marvel films, but, the DC films too, the Christopher Nolan's Batman films and all those television shows like Arrow and Flash and now Supergirl and, Jessica Jones and stuff. So I would say that was at first that would have been true, but not so much anymore. I think it definitely has introduced more people to comic books lately.
So do you think maybe back to the kind of geek pride thing? I don't know if that's the correct term for it, but do you think with all these people kind of embracing things that all the people that have been there from day one have kind of been protective of, as you mentioned, do they kind of go out and maybe seek new things? Maybe geeks start watching football or something like that?
Well, I think that question proceeds from the idea that these people don't have diverse interests to begin with. You know what I mean? One of the reasons that I think that I tried to talk about literature and regular books, so to speak, in some of these essays, was because people that are geeks at this point, by and large, have a large variety of interests beyond that. I know plenty of people that I'm seeing Star Wars with who are huge sports fans. I think that people have already had diverse interests. There are some myopic folks who are only interested in Star Wars and Star Wars novels, but that is an extreme minority, I think, of people who call themselves geeks. At least in this day and age.
Sure. Well, and I also want to ask you, I guess, your thoughts on, we mentioned growing up in the 80s and all the great TV shows and the cartoons especially. What do you think of the, what kids have access to nowadays growing up as far as, there's no Saturday morning cartoons and there's not really a lot of anything that seems interesting. I might just be an old guy, though. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what, the Star Wars cartoons are awesome. I was very suspicious of the Clone Wars cartoon, and I was babysitting a little bit when that first started airing in like '08 or so, and I thought that it was garbage, but it got really good, and it got good because it was able to tap into some of the stuff that maybe the Star Wars prequels weren't able to, and it's great. And then now the new one, Rebels, is really good. It's really exciting. So it's just like in the Star Wars microcosm, those cartoons are great. And I don't know, like kids are so spoiled, right? Like they get so many of these great movies that come out, all these like great Pixar movies, and they get, they got all the Harry Potter movies in the previous decade. I don't know. They're kind of spoiled. In terms of cartoons, I might not know enough. But it seems like that there might be some okay stuff out there. I'm always so optimistic, though. It's a default setting of mine.
Well, then it seems like I might be one of those guys you said that just needs to get over it.
No, but it's important to have the conversation. You know what I mean? Like I think that if I can come around to the Clone Wars, you know what I mean, and I was really against it. That cartoon. If I can come around to it, then that I just feel like then there might be other stuff out there that's good.
Sure. Well, again, Ryan Britt's with us, and the book Luke Skywalker Can't Read, Other Geeky Truths is out now. And I know you're always working on stuff, so is there something else coming up or a project maybe you're working on?
Right now I'm, after the book's just come out, I'm doing, some book party stuff for it in New York, and then I'm going on tour in January. And I'm hoping to polish off either a novel or another essay collection like this. But for now, this is definitely the focus for the next few months.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely a great book. And, as we mentioned, so many great things around that time that you could probably do a whole series of these down the road.
Oh, that sounds great. We'll just see how everybody likes this one.
Excellent. Well, again, Ryan, thanks a lot for being on with us today.
You bet.
And again, that was author Ryan Britt, and his new book, Luke Skywalker Can't Read and Other Geeky Truths, is available now.